Nice to have you with us again. You're live with us from Amiga Live TV. My name, I hope everyone knows by now, is Linda Appiah, and I am a barrister practicing in England and Wales and also in Ghana. So I'm with you this evening to help you with all your needs in terms of your legal issues, legal problems, and solutions that you're looking for to lots of legal challenges that are around these days, especially in the area of immigration right now. You've all heard of the boat people coming from France, etc., trying to come to the UK and claim asylum. And tragically today we've also heard of the death of a number of migrants in the English Channel as they were trying to come to the UK, which is very sad news for them. But for us lawyers, it means there's a lot of running around and trying to support and help our clients in those circumstances. So what are we here to do today? We're here to talk about another area of immigration. But before I do that, of course, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, of course. So to World Remit is our sponsor for this evening for all your money transfer needs. You can hook up with me in terms of calling on 07543 989 940. Okay, so call in to us at the studio if you have any questions. Again, that number 07543 989 940. You know by now, for those of you that follow Amiga Live TV, that we're coming to you through Facebook, through YouTube, and also on our website. So you can look at all of our features and all of our programs that we've done over the last few months and update yourself in terms of any information you need on any of the areas of law that I have done over the last 3 months, I think it is now, that I've been with you. Please do like and subscribe, do support Amiga Live TV so that we can continue to bring you quality programming, okay? So as I said, looking at this evening's topic, what are we here to look at? We're here to look at deportation. Deportation, again, as I said, is another hot potato. And with me this evening, I have brought 2 guests to discuss this topic. I've got first with me a very learned solicitor who's been working in immigration law for a number of years, Naima Moalin, who is a solicitor at Duncan Lewis Solicitors. Hi Naima, nice to have you with us this evening.
Hi Linda, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And also another guest of ours this evening who are described as a community leader. He's a gentleman who's part of the SDA Church of Ghana, but based here in the UK, and he calls himself Abusuapanyin Yao Collins. Yao Collins, good evening.
Good evening, Linda.
Nice to have you with us as well. So as I said, viewers, we're here to look at deportation, okay? So looking at what we're here to discuss, Naima and Yao, in the areas of deportation. If I start with you first, Naima, if that's okay. People hear deportation, people use the word deportation. Sometimes you and I would agree incorrectly, but that we'll come on to that later. If I was to ask you what is deportation, what would you say the explanation would be?
Yes, you're right. Deportation is used interchangeably with removal. And essentially deportation is the process where because of either a criminal conviction or some other reason why the Home Office does not want you in this country, they will remove you, deport you from the UK to your country where you're originally from.
Yeah, so it's really in terms of, if I can put it in simple terms, it's like a ban. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so you'll be removed from the UK and there will be a ban on you coming back to the UK.
Yeah, yeah. I know you had a question for me in relation to crime and the link between deportation. Is there a question that you wanted to ask about that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think when my learned friend was talking, she mentioned that you could be removed for a crime. Now my question is, at times there is just this argument as to what crime can lead to the deportation. So can my friend tell us the sort of crimes that can make someone be deported from the country?
Essentially, where someone has been convicted of a crime and they've been sentenced to 12 months or more, by law, there's an automatic trigger where they can be deported. And even if they haven't been convicted for 12 months or more, if they've been very naughty and done lots of petty crimes, that could also show that they can be deported from the UK.
So my further question to that is, if you're, say, convicted for a crime and then you are put in prison and you serve your sentence, can you then automatically be deported? Or it depends on the length of time that you spend in prison?
Like I said, 12 months is what automatically starts the deportation process. If you've had loads of criminal convictions that are less, where the sentence was less than 12 months, that could also show that you're a persistent offender. So you're somebody the Home Office does not want in the UK, and they can try and deport you. And in terms of criminal offences, what I come across in my practice is drugs offences, violence offences. I've had some fraud cases as well. So essentially the 12 months is the key. If you've been sentenced for more than 12 months, then you should be really worried, because the law says automatically you're liable. You are at risk of being removed, deported from the UK.
I think, yeah, I agree 100% with Naima on what she's saying. I think the essence of it is, it's not the type of crime. And it actually doesn't matter the length of sentence once it's over 12 months.
That's right.
Once you've got 12 months, whether it be murder, although you're not going to get 12 months for murder, but whether murder, drugs, even petty offences, once you get a 12-month term of imprisonment, so they say you must go to prison for 12 months, yeah? That's what then triggers the deportation action. And it's automatic. It doesn't mean you'll be automatically deported, because there's a process to go through, but it means that they will start that process because you've gone to prison for 12 months or more. Yeah, and also what the other thing Naima was saying was that it also depends on whether the person then is a persistent offender. So you may have lots and lots of small offences you committed. A theft, you got 3 months. Then after you've come out of prison, 6 months later, you get done for another theft. You're carrying a bit of drugs on you, and you've got maybe 6 months. So by themselves, all of them are under 12 months. But the problem is because you keep being convicted, you keep getting into trouble with the police. That's why it then becomes automatic deport for those over 12 months, but also persistent offenders as well. So once you've got a lot of offences, that can also start the deportation process. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, good. Now, I think we're talking about the obvious deportation and all that sort of stuff, Naima, but looking at the kind of people who are done for those sort of offences, what are we talking about in terms of actual immigration position for somebody? Yeah? Are we talking about anybody? So, for example, I'm British, so if I am naughty and I decide to do go the wrong way, let's say, could I then get deported? I think using me as an example.
No. Deportation can only be taken against people who are not British. So anyone who's below that, who's either got a visa for a short period, or they've been granted what's called indefinite leave to remain, which means they can stay here permanently. So anything below British citizenship status puts you at risk if you do get into crime and you are sentenced. That's the risk.
So I have a question for that, Naima. Talking about being a British citizen, if you acquired your citizenship through naturalization, can you still be deported, say, to your country of origin, or once you're British, you're British? Doesn't matter how you acquired it.
More or less, the only exception to that would be if you've been involved in terrorism or other offences that the government would consider to be against national security. So in those cases, the Home Office would try to take your British citizenship away from you, and then that would lead you to be deported. And I think a current example of that would be the case involving the young girl who was groomed by ISIS.
Shamima Begum.
Shamima Begum. She, while she was outside the UK government tried to take away her British citizenship.
Yeah, that was done by the former, I think, Home Secretary Sajid Javid.
Yes.
And then the problem with that is, as I understood it, that the UK government was successful in terms of that's what they were going to do. But then I think at the moment it's been appealed.
No, I think it's the other.
Is it the other way around?
Unsuccessful, and they're now trying to appeal. And the reason they were unsuccessful was by taking away her British citizenship, she then became stateless. So the issue was, did she have citizenship from her parents' home country, Bangladesh?
Yes.
And she didn't.
Yes. And that may raise, I know, a number of questions that may come into your mind. Stateless, what's all that, and all of that sort of stuff. A slightly different topic, but I think what I can say briefly is that under international law, no one should be left without a country. Yeah, that's a general consensus between nations. So if you take away someone's citizenship from them and leave them with nothing, then they are stateless. And under international law, that's not right, it's not fair, it's not just for a person to have no home, no place that they can call home. So that's what we mean by stateless. So that could be involved in a deportation case, even though Shamaima's one is slightly different. It could be involved in deportation, I think, but it tends to be in other areas that you end up with that sort of issue of statelessness. So if I just move on, Naima, we talked about removal, we talked about deportation. So can you tell us the difference between the two? So if we break it down, actually look at the difference. What's deportation? What's removal? I know we've said deportation is usually to do with criminal activity.
Yes.
Why is that different from the official word removal?
It's different because...
And you know, probably to add to the question that you're asking, because quite often you have people using the term deportation for people who have maybe overstayed their visa.
Exactly.
And oh, where is he? Oh, he has been deported. They usually use that term.
Exactly.
So to add to that,
Exactly.
is that term being used wrongly?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So it's just become a generic term which covers everything, and wrongly it applies to people who haven't committed a criminal offence, who've just overstayed, or they're here without a visa, or they entered illegally, and they've been asked to leave the UK, or they've been removed forcefully from the UK. And the key difference is that deportation deals with someone who's been convicted of a criminal offence. Removal is just someone who doesn't have a visa to be in the UK.
Okay.
So if we then move on, I certainly know that the next question, I've got lots of examples of these, and I'm sure you have, Naima, in relation to indefinite leave to remain. So you're here, whether it be through the 10-year route, whether it be through having overstayed and got here after the 20 years, you've got indefinite leave to remain, okay? You have the right to stay here permanently. You're not British. There's a nice big stamp where you've got a biometric card, which then says indefinite leave, yeah? And then you go and commit a criminal offence, okay? So what, in essence, can happen to you as a result of you having indefinite leave, ILR as we all call it, and then you're committing a crime?
Well, if you commit a crime and that 12-month sentence is what you've been sentenced to, deportation is automatically triggered the process. So the Home Office would normally write to you and they would say, we want to deport you from the UK because of all of these reasons, and they'd ask you to give put your case forward as to why you shouldn't be deported. And mostly it's usually family members in the UK, and also how long you've lived here, so your own family life in the UK and the time that you've been in the UK. What will then happen is, if after they've looked at all the reasons you've given them and they still think that they want to deport you, they will issue a deportation order against you, and in that deportation order you're able to go to court and appeal against it, and ultimately if you lose, you will be deported from the UK. But if you're someone who has ILR and you win, you won't go back to your ILR status that you had. Most likely you'll be put on a temporary type of visa, usually for 30 months, where you'll have to keep asking the Home Office to renew it and extend it on a current basis.
Yeah, because I think the obvious reason is Home Office do that to keep an eye on you.
Yes.
And to check to see if you get yourself into trouble after that, because if you do, then no doubt they'll go through the deportation process
and
again.
The hard thing is, if you didn't, even if you managed to beat the deportation procedure,
Yes.
you won't be able to apply for British citizenship
No.
because of the fact that you've got a criminal conviction and you've had deportation procedure taken against you. So you are on some type of time limit.
Yes.
Essentially,
Yeah.
And is that permanent? You know, is it permanent that you can't ever apply for British citizenship?
No, it's not permanent. We're straying a little bit from the topic at hand, but there are the law says if you are convicted of a certain type of offence, you have X number of years where it will leave your record. The legal term is become spent, and certain sentences, I think it's more than 6 years.
Yes.
Will never leave your record. So essentially, yes, you can never get British citizenship.
Yeah, so it again depends on the length of the sentence. Naima, I was just talking about examples. I think you and I worked on a case that certainly for me is memorable in relation to a gentleman who had ILR, and when he had ILR, he then committed an offence. It went to appeal. It was successful, so we managed to get through all of that because the offence was assaults. And I don't know what happened to him. I mean, he'd been here since he was a young chap. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
He'd been here since he'd been a young chap, a child even, and was here with all of his family. And everything had been going swimmingly, so it seemed. And then as he got older, I don't know, anger management issues, I'm not quite sure. He then found himself before the criminal justice system, was convicted of assaults, rather nasty assaults, I have to say, but not the most serious. And then went down deportation, went to court, got through that, and then went off and then did it again.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
Almost the same offence as well.
Yeah, the same type of offence. It's only, they were all assaults. And this was over a number of years. And, you know, I mean, there's only so much you can do. I mean, certainly for our community, what I find, especially with the young people, is that it is almost heartbreaking, isn't it? Then you find that the person's been here again, more examples of who've been here since they were babies, 2, 3, 4 years old, who are not yet British. They assume they are because they're assimilated into the UK system, so they get on and do what they want to do. So if their friends decide to go out and do a little street robbery, go out and do some drug muling, then they go along thinking, so what? You know, I can make some extra cash on this. Have you got examples of cases like that, Naima, as well?
Yeah, plenty. And it's actually quite heartbreaking because they would have... I've had clients who came here as a baby and they would have become British had the family members or whoever was caring for them made the right applications.
Yes.
And the first time the client has realised they're not British is when the Home Office write to them and say, we're going to deport you from the UK. And they're very adamant and very shocked. I'm British, I've been here my whole life. But unfortunately, if you don't follow the correct process and get all your paperwork in order, you are at risk. And that's why I feel it tends to affect minority communities more. Because sometimes they just don't realise the importance of sorting out their immigration status because they're here and they're, like you said, assimilated into British life. It's only when something goes wrong that they then realise how important it is.
And also, sorry, I just and also the Home Office fees are extortionate.
Yes.
Frankly,
Yes.
I mean they're so high that if somebody tells you that for you and your 3 children it's going to cost you £10,000 to make applications to regularise your stay, I think for a lot of people you'd rather hedge your bets and just continue life as you have before, thinking at some point I'll sort it out. But realistically, I mean, you're trying to sort out housing, you're trying to sort out schooling, you're trying to sort out your employment. There's a lot you're trying to sort out. So to then add immigration to it and expect me to cough up £10,000, especially now with the immigration health surcharge, which has gone up again today.
Yes.
With all of that going on, I mean, it's a lot, isn't it, for people?
I've had, and also the key thing is when you come here as a child or as a baby, you are dependent on your family member, your parents. But once you turn 18, you become independent and separate from them. And if you don't get indefinite leave to remain or British before that stage, you then become separate and you have to apply on your own. And a lot of the clients I've come across, the young people, they just didn't realise they had to do anything. And then they just go about life. Some even went to university. It's only when something goes wrong, they get into the wrong crowd or something happens. And it can happen to anyone, really.
Yes, it can.
So I just wanted to find out, you were talking about children who are brought, like babies who are brought here and they get themselves involved in things and at times they deported. Now, my question is the age limit. Is there any age limit where, or we just mentioned 18, is it the cutoff point that once you're 18 you can't be deported, or there's no age limit?
I believe so. There's no upper age limit, so you could be 80, 90 and they'll still try to deport you. And I don't think there's, obviously if you're a child,
I think if you're a child on your own,
yeah,
you wouldn't be able to deport a child. But when the families, there's a family deportation, that's a slightly different question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in terms of the upper and lower age limit, you can't deport anyone before the age of 18. And then in terms of older, I think my oldest client has been 64, 65, because he just couldn't stop offending because it was drugs.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. There's usually underlying addiction issues that they never address. And what happens is, because of that, they just get all of these constant troubles because of it. Yeah.
Sadly, my client, he, the drug stuff that he was involved in, he'd been involved in since he was in his 30s when he first came here. And even though he's sort of slightly older than you'd expect, got himself involved in drugs. And sadly, he's died now from coronavirus. But at the time, what had happened was that the drug dealers would come to his house, knock on the door, say, right, it's your turn, come on, we're going to go shopping. And that's because he had to then pay for the drugs that he used somehow, and it was by shoplifting. So he was constantly getting caught for shoplifting in the town centres and everything, so he ended up in trouble that way. So it can be quite tough, I think, for a lot of people. Before I go on with any more questions, I just want to give a shout out to those who are watching. So give a shout out to Sandra Okosa, to Jane Appiah, and to Eric Kufi as well. I see you, so thank you very much for watching. I'll come back to those later and give a shout out, no doubt, to some other viewers who are also watching us at the same time. So thank you, keep watching, okay? So just looking at, let's see, the next question. We're going to go on and look at the process for deportation, so how deportation actually takes place. So Naima, I think, had already explained to us that we were looking at the 12-month sentence. And I think one of the questions, I suppose, in the mind is that sometimes you see people with 4-year sentences, some people with 10-year sentences. Now, does the deportation process start from the time they go to prison or at a later stage? What would you say to that, Naima?
It's up to the Home Office, really. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will start after your sentence is finished. Home Office can start it at any point once you're convicted and you start your sentence. In practice, they normally do wait until you're coming towards the end of your sentence, where, as we have in this country, you'll do part of your sentence, the rest you're going to be released on licence. So at that stage is when, in my case, that's normally when they start. So just as you're about to be released on licence.
Because I think in terms of the processing them, once you're getting towards the end of your sentence, middle of your sentence, however the Home Office choose, they say, right, okay, it's time for us to start the deportation process. What's the first thing they'll do?
They'll write to you in prison and they'll say to you, we want to deport you for all of these reasons. Put your case forward why you shouldn't be deported. And then there are strict time limits that you have to respond to those requests. And if you fail and you don't, and you miss those deadlines, there'll be serious repercussions at the end. So it's very important that if a family member has been convicted for more than 12 months, the family or friends do get legal advice as quickly as possible. Because what I'm finding in my experience is, whilst they're in prison, the person may not be able to access a solicitor. They don't have a phone, and so it's really hard for them to deal with all those letters. And that's why family members should really stay on top of that.
Yeah. But then again, you've got, I suppose, the other social issue, if I can call it that, of going to prison, family connections being lost or strained because of the offence that you've committed. Mum probably, if you're a young man, mum probably pulling her hair out, don't know what to do with you, and so sort of ostracised or decides to ignore you for a bit. And in all of that, you've then got the deportation process to try and fight as well. So on a practical level, it's difficult, but it has to be done. Because really the reality is that you could be deported. I think one of the probably most pathetic, I suppose, cases I've had is where I had a young client, he was just turned 18, and he one day just said to me, through all this deportation, we'd just started the process, he actually said to me, "Miss, are they going to send me away?" And it was said in such a way that you think to yourself, this is the only place he's ever known. Now, those are possible reasons why not to deport, but you know, I have to say, the worse the offence, the more difficult, isn't it, Naima, to sort of fight those types of cases?
Definitely. And there's actually, the law now is if you have a sentence of more than 4 years, it's very difficult to fight deportation at that stage.
Yes. I mean, you still go through the same process, but it's almost like there's another bar, there's another hurdle to jump if the sentence is 4 years or more. So it's still the same process, but it's just much more tougher to show that you've got the reasons as to why a person should not be deported. And of course, the younger you are, the less likely you are to have the sort of things that may be able to assist you. Because the younger you are, well, what have you done? I mean, you went to school, you did the basics that everybody probably has done, but you haven't done anything else apart from that. So it's quite tough. So I think then when we were talking, we were saying that, okay, the first thing you do is that the Home Office write to you, ask you why you shouldn't be deported. You tell them all the reasons why you say you shouldn't be deported. And then what do they do? What does the Home Office do with that information?
They'll look at it, they'll consider the whole case, and if they don't agree with your reasons, they will sign what's called a deportation order, and it's that document that bans you from ever returning to the UK if you are deported. And then you are able to appeal against that and put your case before an immigration judge.
It's quite, Let me ask you a question.
So talking about the process and what is involved, definitely you need a lawyer. Definitely need a lawyer to fight your case. And who pays for it? Do you pay for that yourself because of the situation in which you are, being ready to be deported? Do you pay for that, or you can ask for legal aid to support your case?
Depends on what the reasons why you're saying you can't be deported. If you're saying, I can't go back to my country where I was born because I fear for my life, I will be killed or I will be tortured, then the Home Office will look at it as an asylum claim. And for those type of cases, there is legal aid. But unfortunately, for almost everything else, there isn't legal aid. You would have to pay privately yourself.
So it can be an expensive process. I think sometimes when people see the fees, because it is a long process as well, I think that's also what obviously leads to the expenses involved. And because it's automatic deport, it's not the sort of thing, I think, because it's so serious, that people should try and attempt to do themselves. Because no disrespect to the public, but oftentimes it's not done in the proper or organised fashion. And if it's not done in that way, the implications for that, of course, are then you end up being deported. Yeah, and sometimes it's a bit too late to suddenly turn around and ask for lawyers or get lawyers later on, when there are certain steps you should have taken at an earlier stage. Naima, would you agree with that?
I do. I'll also actually just add, I do a lot of legal aid cases. If you happen to find yourself facing deportation and you're completely destitute, you don't have any money, there is something called exceptional legal aid funding, which either yourself or a solicitor or a charity worker could apply for you. There is no automatic legal aid, so yeah, it's very difficult.
Very, very difficult. Okay, so we've talked about Home Office writing to you. We've talked about you then responding to the Home Office inquiry or asking you questions. You send it back to the Home Office then sign a deportation order if they're not happy with what you've put down. And then where do we go from there? So the deportation order's been signed. They give you reasons as well, don't they, Naima, as to why they intend to deport you. Now, it's those reasons that's the basis of the challenge. Would you agree with that?
I agree, yes.
Yeah. So you would then challenge the decision based on the reasons they'll give you. So you would have written, I've got family here, I've got friends, I've lived here all my life, or whatever it is you put down. And they would then reply and say, well, this has happened or that's happened, we don't accept this part. you don't fall within the rules because of this, you don't fall within the rules because of that. So we end up going to, which type of court would you then end up in, Naima?
Immigration and Asylum Tribunal. It's the first tier tribunal, so it's the specialist tribunal that deals with immigration cases.
Yeah, so we end up in that system. There are, however, Naima, situations where you can't get access to the tribunal because of the way in which the Home Office have made their decision. So they put you in a slightly more difficult position, or in a bind almost.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain a little bit about what that is and how that can cause you some difficulty or a longer legal process?
Yeah, so by law there are certain countries which are considered safe. So if you're from that country, you'll still be able to appeal, you'll still be able to challenge it, but you wouldn't be able to do it whilst you're in the UK. You have to be removed, deported, and then appeal while you're outside the UK, which is exceptionally difficult. And the only way you'd have to prevent that would be going a different type of legal challenge. It's called judicial review application, where you're challenging the fact that the Home Office are not allowing you to appeal against this deportation order whilst you're in the UK, which then just complicates things further, and there's more costs involved. Yeah.
And that could be countries as simple as, for example, USA. I mean, I've had an American citizen as a client who committed a criminal offence, and they said, well, it's a safe country, there's no issue there, so you can go back to America and then appeal whilst you're over there. But of course, the practical problem, which I'm sure you can see, with that, is that if the person then ends up going to America, whatever they've been arguing as the reasons to fight to want to stay here are lost, because they're no longer here. So, for example, you've got family here, and you say, well, I want to stay with my family, they need me, they'll be destitute or ruined without me.
And the key thing is we wouldn't be able to continue be a family unless we were here. But obviously, once you're then deported, the question then becomes, how did you continue the relationship? Yes,
exactly. But you've already been deported. In a sense, the harm's already been done. And I think for most courts, they'd look at that and think, well, you're okay, you're over there, nothing's happened to you. You know, the world hasn't fallen apart. So you can continue the appeal process whilst you're in the States or whatever country it is. I mean, I don't know whether there was a question you wanted to ask.
Talking about, I know from a layman's point of view, talking about this deportation order. It's a big term, deportation order. I mean, I know it comes from the Home Office, but is it determined by the courts, or is just the Secretary of State who signs it?
It's the Secretary of State. The Home Office work for the Secretary of State, so it will be one of her agents who will sign that. It won't be herself. But yes, the courts, if you appeal, the courts will look at whether it's lawful or not, but it's the Secretary of State and the Home Office that sign it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's currently Priti Patel, I think, isn't it? Yeah, and I always joke with Naima, because I think recently they called lawyers like Naima activist lawyers, I think.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, because of the assistance they were giving the boat people, what I call them boat people who come from France, etc., who'd come on the boats, if you heard recently, and how I think the Home Office are getting frustrated with lawyers because they felt that lawyers were just putting in applications or claims on behalf of clients and frustrating the rule of law, frustrating the system. So yeah, the deportation's not an easy subject. It's a heavy one, and it leads me on to actually a question that I think is quite current at the moment, which is coronavirus. Have we seen, Naima, any effects from coronavirus or COVID-19 over the whole deportation system? I mean, I know of a few, and it's just really the delay part. I mean, I don't know whether you've experienced that, but for me, the delay has become ridiculous.
Yes.
With deportations. I mean, clients are expecting to get deportation orders or notices. I've not had a lot of those coming through, but you're more on the ground than I am.
Yeah. Well, because of what's happening with the pandemic, a lot of the Home offices where all the files are closed.
Exactly.
So I found delays in a lot of cases, apart from the cases where you would call the boat people. Those ones they've been very active with, but most of the deportation cases that I have, there's not been much happening. There's been a lot of delay in them.
Yeah. And I think when we looked at the sort of terrorist type cases you were talking about earlier But when we're talking about going to court, challenging these decisions from the Home Office, and then the Home Office then deciding that, or the court rather, deciding that your deportation should not go ahead, okay? That's where I think, Naima, you then said then what would then happen is the Secretary of State would have to review, Home Office would have to review, and then they'd give you the 30 months begrudgingly. But in the terrorist type cases, put those words, where there's deportation, there's a different route, isn't there? They don't go to the normal Immigration Appeal Tribunal as we know it to be. Do you want to perhaps look at what sort of system they go through where they're threatened with deportation as well?
Yes, so there's a specialist tribunal that deals with those type of cases because of the fact there's a lot of sensitive information and that national security, or the Home Office would argue national security is at stake. So those type of cases, the evidence, the documents that the Home Office will give you, what you can see are very limited. And actually, when we were talking about legal aid, if you are subject to that type of case where it's a terrorism-related deportation, there will be legal aid automatically for those type of cases.
Yeah, hopefully that's a bit clearer.
Yeah.
Because I know in terms of the community work that you do, there's a lot of questions from especially young people, and even older people actually, about the issues of deportation and the frustration with the system and the way in which I think a lot of people are affected by it. Let me just take a quick break because I can see people are putting up messages, people are watching. Hi to Catherine D as well, who's watching us. Hi, Catherine. Thank you very much. Kofik Erimarfo says, nice program. Thank you very much, Kofi. And a lady called Patience Anko says, nice program. So thank you, Patience, and thank you to everyone else who's watching us live as we're on. And you know that I'm with my guest this evening, Naima, Moalin, and then Abusuapanyin Yao Collins, okay? So thank them again for coming this evening. So we move on, having looked at the deportation process and hopefully the successful outcome that you'd have from there being deportation against you. I know you were asking me earlier when we were talking about this subject about the general family, and there were some concerns about when one goes, they all go.
Yeah.
I wondered, you want to maybe ask us that question and see sort of what it is we can do to answer that.
Right. What I wanted actually to Naima to find out was, like you've just already explained about deportation, which is from committing a crime. Now, if someone commits a crime and the person, they goes through the process and the person is being deported, can the person be deported with, say, the spouse or the family?
It would depend on what the immigration status of the family members and the spouse is. If the whole family has one status and it's because of the father, for example, and they're dependent on him and he's then subject to deportation, yes, unfortunately, it's quite sad, the whole family can be deported. Whereas if the spouse is British or has her own indefinite leave to remain, along with the children, then no, they will not be affected. It will only be the person who's been convicted of the criminal offence that will be deported.
Okay.
Yeah. Go on.
My further question is, at times there's been, discussions as to who pays is it the Ghana government or is it the UK government that pays for deportation? So if you're deported, who pays for it? Like your plane ticket to go back to wherever you
can pay voluntarily. It's very rare that it's the UK government that will pay. And what they normally do is where they have a lot of individuals from certain countries or one country, they will actually charter a flight and they'll pay for that flight to remove as many individuals from that one country as possible. Otherwise, you'd be put on a commercial flight that the Home Office will pay for.
A commercial flight, meaning with other passengers?
Yes.
Which is always, I think, sometimes slightly bizarre.
It is, yes.
I've not sat on a plane, I have to say, with a deportee, as far as I know, I hasten to add.
You would know, actually.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was
they would
going to
have
say.
escorts.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
And they would normally be handcuffed as well.
Yes, that's the thing. And so,
you will be handcuffed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Really?
to ensure removal.
Yeah.
I think there are one or two instances where I know they haven't been, but I know that especially with men, there's certain types where they're quite cautious and concerned because you could cause disruption. You try and stop the plane taking off. Different things can happen or go wrong. So I have to say I haven't had that experience as yet. I suspect neither the two of you have either.
No.
Yeah, because I think it would be a bit of a sight, I suspect, to see someone in cuffs or chains or whatever on a plane with you, with other people sitting around them. Yeah, I think slightly traumatic actually, seeing that.
I
So
have
there's
had a few cases, not very rare, where a client who's been convicted then had deportation started, and they get moved from prison usually to an immigration centre, and we were able to get them out on bail, get them released, and then they were able to convince the Home Office that they would go back on their own, buy their own ticket, so they were able to go home, get all their belongings together and go on in their own time, essentially.
Yes.
But that's very rare.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I've had that certainly with removals more than deportations.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with you. If you can organise and cooperate with the Home Office, or the Home Office see that you're cooperating with them, then I think that they're more willing then to give you time to put yourself together and get your items together. Because otherwise you could be deported and all your things are here.
Yeah.
And what happens to all of that? I mean, you may have significant ties. You may have a car. You may even have a house. There's all sorts you could have. You know what I mean? And all of that just disappears because of your deportation. So if it's a deportation that is bound to go ahead, because there's also that, is it bound to go ahead or not? But if it's bound to go ahead, it's a question of, well, maybe organising your things so that it can be a smooth process for you and as least traumatic as possible for you. Yeah, I think that would be.
And then the question becomes, what do you have in your country, home country,
Yes.
that you haven't been sometimes for years?
Yes.
So if you are removed at the Home Office's behest and they put you on a flight, you're literally just taken to that airport and you're left there and to fend for yourself. So it is very traumatic.
We have a question from somebody. I know some viewers are shy to call in, so they've put the question on our Facebook page. So it says, this is from Augustina Boidu. So Augustina, thank you very much for your question. The question is, if a man is deported but his wife and young children under 10 years remain in the UK, can he ever be allowed at any point back into UK?
There's a 10-year ban.
I think that's why she's probably put 10 years, I suspect.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
So after 10 years have passed, you can make an application to what's called revoke or get the deportation order lifted. So you would, from where you are, you would make an application to the entry clearance office, the visa office there, and I'll explain to them all the reasons why the deportation order should be lifted and you should be allowed back into the UK. But they're very difficult, those type of cases.
I suppose it raises the question. I know Yao's champing at the bit here, but is there a time when a deportation order automatically goes away without you having doing anything? So you're sat back in Ghana, in Accra, and then you're on a deportation. 20 years has passed since the deportation order was issued. Is there a time when the deportation order will just simply go away by itself?
No.
Yeah.
No. It has to be removed by the Home Office. It will never just go away by itself.
Yeah, so there's no time limit to deportation orders.
So with the process about that you just mentioned, with the process, so does it mean that you have to apply to get it revoked before you even apply for the visa?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So
And
that's
that
a
should be after
two-stage.
10 years.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I suppose the more offences there are, the more grave it is, the less likely it is that you will get your deportation order revoked.
And the longer the sentence that you had
Yes.
as well, that will play a part.
Yeah. So hopefully, Augustina, that's answered your question. Because I think the question was, can he ever be allowed at any point back into the UK? So I think the answer is yes, he can, but it's subject to you making an application for that to happen, and also subject to people actually, or the Home Office rather, actually agreeing that yes, we're going to revoke the deportation order. And I can see almost, Naima, some difficulty in that, don't you think so? Because I suppose the point is that if you're on a deportation order, you're back in Accra, and then your spouse, your wife and children are here in the UK, you say you've missed them, you want to see them, but they've managed to come back to Ghana to see you. Some would argue that, well, it's fine. Well, they've managed to see you whilst you're in Ghana. They travel to Ghana every year because, families miss each other. Every year, every 2 years, they see you. Why do you need to come back to the UK? Or they have a choice to then leave the UK and come and live with you in Ghana. So it's I can see, and no doubt our viewers can see that it's quite a tough, an uphill struggle, I think, once the deportation order has taken effect through you actually being removed from the UK. Yeah, I think so, right?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And because of the appeal process, the way it is, once you've had your first bite at the cherry, so to speak, and you've had your case before the first immigration judge, it's very important that you put everything that's relevant to your case and all the evidence that would support your case then, because later on you wouldn't be able to rely on any of that. So that's why, I guess, what Linda said, you can try and challenge deportation on your own without a lawyer, but it would be advisable to get professional help because it's so important.
Yeah.
So my question, but I think you touched on it, deportation and having family ties here. If you have a wife and children, how easy is it for the Home Office to still deport you despite your family ties in this country?
It's still possible. What the tribunal will look at is how does your deportation affect your family members? So if there's young children, how will it affect their development, them growing up here? And just because you've got a wife and child doesn't mean you're going to win a deportation appeal automatically. You have to show a lot of evidence.
So when you talk of a lot of evidence, Naima, when you talk of a lot of evidence to convince the Home Office that you should not be deported, what are some of the evidence that you're talking about?
Well, as an example, the type of cases that I've succeeded with is those cases where the father or the husband is the one facing deportation and the children have got health difficulties or the mother has health difficulties. So it's very important that the father is involved. So we would then get medical reports. Sometimes you can get a social worker, a private social worker, to do a report about what actually does this child or does this mother or other parent need. And those are the sort of things that I've been able to convince the tribunals that deportation should not go ahead for my clients.
I've just had another question come in through text, and the question is, I'm not sure if we've touched on it already actually, but it is from, I'm not sure, they've not put their name, but in any event, the question is, if you are deported, can you ever come back? I have a feeling we've touched on it slightly in terms of the last question we answered, in terms of the family. But Naima, is there anything you want to add to that or clarify on that point?
Just to reiterate, you wouldn't be able to come back automatically, even if you had indefinite leave to remain when you were deported. First 10 years have to pass, then you'd have to apply to get that deportation lifted, and then you'd have to apply for a visa to come back to the UK, depending on what reason it is that you're asking to come back. So most of the cases I've come across is family. They've got married to someone who's now British and they've got children and they want to base their life here. I think I've only ever had 2 instances where I've been able to successfully get a client to come back to the UK, allow them to come back to the UK. I don't know about you, Linda.
No, I haven't. Just because I think I've got one that's pending at the moment actually, but we haven't actually started the process yet. It does remind me, funnily enough, of the old system. You know, years ago, you could be deported. The deportation and removal were almost sort of amalgamated, put together. So overstayers were deported years and years and years ago. I think just before I started practice, or just at the beginning of my practice time, is that they would say deportation, but it could simply be you're an overstayer. It had nothing to do with criminality. That was done away with by the legislation following that. But what I did have was one chap who had been deported from the UK, but deported on the basis of his of being an overstayer. And after he was deported, sorry, there's just a call coming in. Let me just deal with this, because if we don't, then the viewer may go offline. Let me just see who's calling. Hello? Caller, are you there? Hello? Hello? Yeah, I think the person's rung off. I think the caller's rung off. I think the name was Mose. Mose, if you want to call back, please do. And if you have any question, or post your question on our Facebook page. And I just go back to what I was saying, actually. So I had a client who had overstayed and was deported under the old legislation, but then actually managed, I don't know how, I don't think I've gotten to the bottom of it all these years later, managed to come back into the UK, didn't apply for anything, for any deportation order to be revoked or anything. I suspect it probably was illegally, had come back into the UK, but had been found out. So it was then again, the old deportation order was brought up, and in those days, you could say to the judge, well, I want to challenge the deportation order, but I'm challenging it under the old legislation, and then you could actually succeed, funny enough. So the only type of example that you're talking about, the only similar one I've had, is where I've had someone who, as I said, was supposed to be deported, was deported, and somehow managed to come back and won his appeal as well. So that was a bit of a strange one. But no, apart from that name, I've not had any examples. Sorry, I've just paused because we just had a call, but I think the lady's rung off. Caller, do ring in again. I think the name is Bosse. So Bosse, if there's a question you want to ask, you're more than welcome to call back, and we'll see if we can answer your question, all right? Okay, so let's continue and get to the end sort of topics, as it were, of these things. So we've looked at the deportation, the process, and the appeals process, and what happens if deportation ends. Oh, we've got the caller calling back. So I think this is Bosse calling. Let me just answer this call. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hello, caller. Are you there?
Me? Yes, I am.
Yeah, hello, caller. I don't think we can hear you in the studio. Hello, caller.
I'm trying to call in.
Let me try and put it on loudspeaker. I don't know if that's going to work.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, caller. Yeah, there's a lot of background noise to it. Yes, caller.
I've got the program on. I'm trying to call the people out.
Hello. Yes. Yes. Sorry, what's your question, caller?
Is deportation now being used as a political tool?
Okay.
And I was just wondering that it seems like, from what I'm hearing now, that deportation is stacked adversely on ethnic lines. And I was wondering what ethnic lawyers, whether they have a higher duty to both educate and advocate for the human rights of ethnic communities because of the complexity of deportation and the laws surrounding it. And just looking at the examples from what I've heard,
Right.
I was just wondering whether it is being used as a political tool.
Okay. Thank you, caller. I just talked to Naima and Yao about this. I don't know if anyone watching can hear the question. You probably can't. You seem to be having technical problems. But that doesn't matter. I think that the caller's question, and this is a question from Bosse, she's asking whether she's seeing or noticing perhaps that there's an ethnic, as it were, issue. So are these being drawn along ethnic lines? Are there problems particular or peculiar to the ethnic minority community, perhaps in this country and other countries, or in relation to deportation cases? Naima, I don't know if you have a view on that, or Yao, you have a question that you want to ask from that. Yeah, so Naima, I don't know whether, sorry, I thought Bosse was talking there.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there was a question you wanted to answer that in terms of the ethnic lines, etc.
I think in terms of whether deportation is being used as a political tool, what I found is different politicians have different objectives, and obviously once they've been voted into power, they will make the laws, and that's how the democracy in this country works.
Sure.
The where I get uncomfortable is the Home Office or politicians being unhappy when the courts have made a decision that they don't agree with, and then using that to criticise the lawyers who are just doing their job. Because at the end of the day, as lawyers, we're just there to put the client's case forward in accordance with the law, and all the arguments that we make are what's available to them in accordance with the law. And ultimately, it is an independent judge who will decide whether the person should be deported or removed or not. In terms of whether ethnic minorities are more affected by deportation, I would say so, yes. It comes to, and I think people who practice criminal law will probably say, people who are from the ethnic minority communities tend to be disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system. And if they then are not British, they will then have deportation proceedings started against them. So yeah, I would agree to that.
I think simply by the mere fact that we're more vulnerable.
Yes.
Because we're more likely to have a white person. I mean, if you think about the economics, I suppose world economics, if we have to go sort of into all of that, when we're looking at migration tends to happen from one end to the other. So from east, if you like, to west, or from south north, right? So in our countries tend to be those countries within that description or within that band. And because of that, we tend to be the ones who will no doubt be affected by immigration issues more than a white person would. I mean, I've given an example of an American who is here in this country, but I don't very often have, in terms of immigration clients, certainly ones with problems, a lot of white clients. They tend to be ethnic minority clients, they tend to be black, Asian clients, those sort of people. So undoubtedly we're more affected than anybody else, naturally.
Yeah. And the white clients that I've had tend to be European nationals who have been convicted of criminal offence, and then the Home Office wants to remove them because deportation, the procedure is more or less the same if you're non-European as if you are a European national.
So that actually, Naima, has brought us on to the next question, which is about the EU. So let's forget about the fact that there are going to be changes, which there will be after 31st of December. But before then, in terms of the current position, what's the current position for EU nationals? So I'm Polish, and I've decided, I don't know, to go and slap someone, and then I've gone to prison for 24 months, let's say, so over the 12-month threshold. Am I treated differently from someone from the rest of the world, as it were?
Not necessarily. It's just a different procedure, well, the same process, but different thresholds, different laws that will be applied. Yes. If you're a European national, it's harder to deport a European national than it is a non-European national. And especially if you're a European national that has been here for a long time, and the key sort of period is 5 years. So you've lived here, worked here for 5 years, then you get into trouble. It's a lot harder. The threshold that the Home Office have to show to deport someone who's built up that number of years in the UK is harder. It's stronger as well.
Sorry, just to interrupt, I'm getting another call coming through. I think this one somehow is managing to put itself on my laptop. The person's rung off, I think. But caller, do ring in again if there is a question that you wanted to ask us, and we'll try and help you as much as we can. So Naima, you were just talking about EU nationals. I think you'd finished. We were talking about the fact that EU nationals can be deported, but it's much more difficult, and it's a different way in which they're deported. And we'll talk about issues or grounds of public policies, public security, or public health. So there's specific reasons why you have to, the Home Office will have to show why they can deport an EU national, which is more difficult for the Home Office as opposed to those of us from the rest of the world. Yeah, so I think that's what we take away from that. And unfortunately, the changes that will come, or fortunately, depending on which side you're on, the changes that will come with the EU and us leaving Europe is that I think the whole system is just going to be brought into one. So EU nationals who before had certainty and could, in some ways commit certain offences and they're not get into too much trouble over and above anybody else who's British here, will find themselves being put in the same pot as the rest of the world. So they can be deported, they can be treated the same way as the rest of the world is being treated. which is unfortunate, but it seems to me that that's the way in which it's going to go. I've just got a caller coming through here. I don't know whether we can hear, because we are having technical issues this evening, viewers, so I do apologise. But it's a call, I think, from Jane. I can't see the surname. Jane, can you hear me? Do you have a question, caller?
I do. If you're deported from a country in Europe, what impact does that have on you trying to get a stay ordered in the UK?
Okay, so your question is, if you've got a deportation from Europe, is that what you said?
Yeah.
So you're in the UK, but the deportation would be, let's say, for you to be returned to France.
So you're from Ghana.
Yes, you're from Ghana, yeah.
And you overstayed in France for a period of time.
Okay,
And you were returned back to Ghana.
yeah.
What impact then would that have on the ability to then stay in the UK or migrate to the UK?
Okay. So I think what the caller's talking about is it's off topic a little bit, because I think it's more to do with illegality and somebody going to France. You're Ghanaian, you're in France, you overstayed in France, you're then sent back to Ghana. What about how would that impact on your ability to come to the UK? I think that's a different question. It's not a thank you, caller.
Yeah.
It's not a deportation question per se, but I think we can give a short answer to that, can we, Naima, since the caller's asked the question?
Yeah, that's more to do with visa requirements.
Yes.
So I don't know if anyone's ever applied for a visit visa or any type of visa for family members.
Mm.
When you go through the application, they do ask you, have you ever been refused a visa in a different country? Have you ever been asked or removed from another country?
Mm.
And what they want to look at is, because a visa is temporary, when you come to the UK, will you leave after your visa expires? So that can be used to refuse you a visa into the UK. I think that's what the caller's question is.
Yeah, I believe so. Caller, sorry, the viewers can't hear the question clearly. I can sort of hear it. But caller, I hope that's answered your question. Yeah, it has? Okay, well, thank you very much for calling. I think that actually leads us on to one other question, Naima, which actually I wanted to ask. Again, just leading on, looking at the deportation aspects of it. In the forms, of course, let's say, for example, you're in the UK and then you got deported back to Ghana, but then you've got family living in another country. So you've got family living in the USA. You would have to declare the fact that you had deportation in the UK when making an application. Let's say you've got another country you can go to, you've got an option to go to America. You would have to declare that you were subject of deportation proceedings or are under a deportation order when you make the application to America, for example. Would you agree with that as well?
Yes, and certain countries have agreements amongst themselves where they can check or they share information.
Okay.
So if you didn't declare that in your application and they then were to find out, they could refuse your visa on the basis that you've used deception to get a visa.
Yes. And also, I think with this country, not necessarily America, because I'm not familiar with American law, but certainly with this country, if, for example, someone had been deported from, let's look at the other way, been deported from America back to Ghana, and then applies to come here, and you fail to declare the fact that you're subject of a deportation order from America, and you don't mention it, and then this government or Home Office or whatever find out, which they will find out that you're subject to a deportation order from America, not only will you be refused the visa that you seek to come here, but you'll also be banned for 10 years. Again, there's a magic number 10, isn't there?
Yes,
I don't know why everybody suddenly got excited about 10, but there is this 10-year ban whereby you'll be deported. Well, you wouldn't be allowed to come to the UK, and you would be stopped, so you wouldn't be permitted to come for the next 10 years because you didn't declare deportation order for America. Does that make sense?
But the question, the question with what you're just saying, the question is, it is with America. So you're banned for 10 years. Is it because you didn't declare it?
Yes.
Yes. Really? Because I thought it was a different country altogether. So I mean, how does it apply?
But if the form asks you, the form asks, have you ever been removed or required to leave a country, which you were, because you were removed or required to leave by a deportation order from the US, and you said no, then you have misled the authorities here. I think that's the point, isn't it, Naima?
Yeah, they've asked that question on the form because it's a factor that they want to look at when deciding whether to give you the visa, and by the fact that if you don't declare it, you are misleading them. So that's what attracts the ban.
Yeah. Okay. I think the last bit that, certainly in terms of what we were going to talk about, I suspect actually we've actually already discussed it, viewers, which is following the deportation order and the end of the appeals process. Is there anything next? Anything that happens after that? So I think if there is a deportation order and the deportation order is successful, then you go back to the country that the Home Office say you should go to. And then there's another funny issue with that. Sorry, we've just got another call coming through. So let me just deal with that, and then we'll see. Hopefully we can hear the caller now. Hello, caller?
Hello?
Hello, caller? Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, hello. Can I have your name, please, and where you're calling from? Hello? Oh, we've got another call that's disappeared. Okay, we seem to be having some issues, but do try and persist, caller, and we'll see if we can get an answer to your question. Naima, I was just sort of wrapping up really in terms of looking at the appeals process and also looking at the deportation order as itself. So if the deportation order is an order which is then enforced, you're then removed to your country, 10-year ban. If the appeals process is successful, then you then get 30 months and have to keep applying for 30 months. And hopefully behave yourself, and eventually you would get your indefinite leave, then you can become British, because that's not going to last forever. And so really, looking at the two options, it's either a deportation order that sticks, and unfortunately you then have to suffer the consequences, or it's a deportation order that you can overcome. But not like, I suppose, like cat with 9 lives. There's a limited amount of chances that the Home Office would give a person. And if the person continues to commit offences, at some point the Home Office are going to say enough is enough and push forward as hard as they can with the courts. And the courts will say enough is enough. Yeah. And then say, no, we're not going to allow your appeal, and therefore you need to be deported.
Yeah, because the key issue would be the risk of reoffending, the risk to the public. And if you keep reoffending, it's not, you wouldn't be able to convince a judge that you wouldn't reoffend ever again, because the facts show that you have.
Yeah, I certainly once had a judge say to me, how many chances are we supposed to give him? And the judge just asked me point blank, because I think we're on our 3rd appeal.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where you're flogging a dead horse almost, where you're not sure what other argument you're supposed to make. Well, sorry he did it the first time, and sorry he did it the second time, and this 3rd time he's sorry as well. Yeah, so I think it's quite a tough one. But yeah, you look like you wanted to come back with another question.
Talking about the process again. You know, you mentioned that the process starts maybe when you've been given a sentence. I mean, towards the end of a sentence, the process starts, and then you mentioned that you're removed from the prison to a holding centre or something like that.
Immigration
detention centre. So you're not given any chance at all to maybe touch base, go home, or anything at all, just from there straight onto the plane.
Once they've decided, and they normally do by the time you come towards the end of your sentence and you're about to be released, once they've decided that they want to deport you, they can then detain you under immigration powers. So that means despite the fact that you finish your sentence and you can be released, they will hold you on immigration powers to say that while we are trying to remove this person and enforce the deportation, we will hold them in the detention centre, because otherwise they'll run away and we'll never hear from them again. So at that stage, you are able to apply for what's known as bail, to be released to your family or your own accommodation.
Does that answer that question as well?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, I think we have hopefully dealt with as much as we can in relation to deportation orders, the process, the long drawn-out process, because it can take years, I think, can't it, Naima, to get through the deportation process, because even if you're unsuccessful in the tribunal before an immigration court, you can still appeal and appeal and appeal, and it can go on for quite a long time. And I think Naima would agree with me in saying that, in my opinion, deportations seem to be at the top of the agenda, certainly for the last 2 or 3 years, before we sort of had coronavirus and before we started having a lot of migrants coming in from other European countries, migrants from third countries coming to Europe and then coming to the UK. But before that, deportations were fast and furious, I would say, especially with the gang-related violence as well, because a lot of young people were involved in gangs, and I think that the idea was to split the gangs up and to stop the criminality continuing any further. So I would like to say thank you to both of you for coming this evening. Hopefully that's given you enough information to go back and take to your community to be able to support and direct the people where they need to go.
One thing I'll take away, Linda, one thing I'll take away is the use of the term deportation. So I think we've not been using it right, because a lot of times we say the person has been deported, but actually the person has actually been removed, not deported. So I think it's something that I'm going to take away with me. Yeah, well that's good, because you're not alone. The media does it as well. And I have tried to correct them, but I think I've given up. I've just decided there's no point trying to correct people anymore, because everybody uses the wrong term, so just go with it. As long as I know what I'm talking about, that's the main thing.
I agree as well, Linda. I've given up. It doesn't matter.
It
seems not to matter anymore. And I think the word deportation sounds more exciting to people, I think, than the removal. That's probably one of the reasons why. As I said, so thank you both of you for coming this evening. Thank you for Abusuapanyin Collins. Thank you to Naima Moalin for coming this evening from Duncan Lewis Solicitors to help the community and help our people to understand a lot of the problems that they're going through and how they can take those first steps to try and solve their problems. And there's no need to suffer in silence, because there are people who are able to help you, lawyers who are able to support you and give you assistance. And as Naomi said, there are also people who are able to support you if, for example, you need legal aid or you need some sort of financial assistance in trying to get through the deportation process. But of course that means you've got to meet certain criteria. It is an expensive business, but it's also a valued business. So I do thank our viewers for watching. I will give a shout out, because I know some of you do like to hear your names. So if I can see some of your names, then I will then tell you. So Naima, thank you very much for watching. Florence Osei as well, thank you for watching as well. Augustina, thank you as well. And Akir Danswa, thank you as well for watching. A shout out to our sponsors as well, of course, World Remit for all your money transfer needs. Do remember, Omega Live TV is on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're also on our website. You can find us on our website if you just put into the search engine Omega Live TV. We're also on Sky as well, so please do look us up. Look on our Facebook page, and all the information about where else you can find us will be on our Facebook page as well as on our website. So I would like to say thank you very much this evening, viewers. Do catch me in 2 weeks' time. I will advertise the programme and the topic we're going to talk about shortly. And my name is Linda Appiah, as you know. I'm a barrister. Please do ensure that you get your own independent legal advice, of course, with any of your legal issues. And without further ado, I'd like to say good evening and thank you.